then share. Excellent. That's how we know. Beautiful. Okay, so Constanza and what was the last other woman's name? And Cheryl. Okay, so we, as I said, we've kind of gone. Anne Louise, Layla, Maria, another woman named Lily, and one other person. They have been with me all the way from this. I think we're probably in week 13 probably now of this course. And so as a result of this series, and so there may be things that you're not going to understand or things that we're not going to get into. You can feel free to put stuff into the chat box as far as questions are concerned, and I will try to keep you up to speed as much as possible. Now, there are some things that you will have that will be difficult if you don't already have access to them. And you should first of all look into the chat box. And in the chat box, you're going to see 3 different things that I've left there. One of them is the, oh, wait, let me get here. Oh, here it is. Damn it. Okay, so one of them is rather 2 of them are Christian Astrology by William Lilly, 1st volume and 2nd volume. And you should go ahead and click on that MediaFire link and download those. And then the 3rd is this thing called the Astrological Dignity Chart. And you should actually download that right now because we're gonna use that. We're going to use that in the next exercise that we are about to go into. All right, so Sharon and Constanza, I'm not sure exactly how much and even Diana, since you've kind of been in and out, I'm not sure how much of the jargon or that you kind of know or remember, but look at these 5 terms: domicile, exaltation, triplicity, term, and face. These are all called the essential dignities, rather. And essential meaning esse, from the Latin word esse, which means to be. So it's a dignity of beingness, and it's based on a planet's placement in a sign. So when a planet is placed in a sign that it rules, and as you can see here, okay, good. We got somebody coming in for a question. I've just watched your webinars from YouTube. That they were there. Okay, excellent. Oh, it's these last 3 or 4 weeks actually where we've talked about these. So I think if you've watched most of them, then you won't have a problem kind of keeping up to speed with it. And like I said, I'm willing to kind of slow it down. This isn't a super planned out lesson today. So we've got time to kind of make sure everybody's up to speed with us. All right, but as you can see here, if you look here, this kind of gives us an idea of what's going on. The domiciles, Sagittarius, the domicile ruler is Jupiter. So Jupiter rules Sagittarius and Pisces. And I didn't put any of that old stuff because I was really only expecting the people that have been with me for a while. But Mercury rules Gemini, that says domicile. So when they're really saying domicile, they're really saying what house does it rule? And that's going to be really important. More new people, not so new, more people kind of returning. Hello, Mariah, or Maria. It is Mariah. Welcome back, Mariah. Nice to see you, or nice to have you with us. As you can see here, so everybody should be making this table right now. Just make a table. It should have, 7 rows and 6 columns? Yeah, 7 rows and 6 columns, if you can. And you're going to do, because what we're going to do is we're going to find this thing called a compound almutin. And an almutin, the word almutin means victorious or victor or winner.
My AirPods.
Okay, good. Almutin means victor or winner. And for instance, I use 2 degrees of Pisces as an example. So essential dignity is essentially about how dignified a planet is in the degree of the zodiac it is. Okay, so I'm going to write that down. Essential dignity is about how strong, how strong the planet is in the particular degree of the zodiac where it is placed. So not just is my Venus in Pisces, but my Venus is in the second degree of Pisces. And I think almost all of you have been with me for a while, so you know what I'm going to say about that. When I say the second degree, what do I mean? From 1 degree and 1 minute to 2 degrees and 0 minutes. That is the second degree. The third degree starts at 2 degrees and 1 minute and ends at 3 degrees, and so on and so on and so on. That's a really important thing to remember. Okay, so for instance, 2 degrees of Pisces, and I'm going to bring up right now this astrological dignities chart, and you should too. You should kind of just take a look, get a look at it as we come to it. So what the dignities chart does is it assigns points to each area. So as you can see, there are five different dignities: domicile, exaltation, triplicity, term, and decanate or face. And each of them gets a number of points: 5 for domicile, 4 for exaltation, 3 for triplicity, 2 for term or bound, and 1 for face or decanate. Now we're talking in this particular instance about 2 degrees of Pisces. So in this particular degrees of Pisces, Jupiter gets 5 points for being the domicile ruler. Venus gets 4 points for being the exaltation ruler. Let's say it's daytime. So for those of you who haven't been with me for a little while, I hope you're with me for as far as you probably did learn about triplicities. And so you'll know that for each element, there are 3 planets that rule that element. One that is the day ruler, one that is the night ruler, and one that is the participating ruler. Pisces is a water sign, so the 3 planets are Venus, Mars, and Moon. Once again, we're just doing this for my example to show you what an almutin is. Okay, so just in case you're like, wait, what are we doing? What are we doing? We're finding the almutin of 2 degrees of Pisces. And what is an almutin? An almutin is the planet who is the winner in that degree by points. 5 for Jupiter, 4 for Venus, it's daytime. 3 for Venus, and she becomes the day ruler of the triplicity. If it were nighttime, it would be Mars. She's at 2 degrees. She gets another 2 points for being in the second degree. And then Saturn gets 1 degree. So altogether, even though Jupiter is the domicile ruler, giving him 5 points, Venus is the exaltation, triplicity, and term ruler, which gives her 4 plus 3 is 7, plus 2 equals 9 points, which makes her the almutin, which makes her the winner or almutin. So the point to this is that not in all cases is the planet who is the ruler of the sign the victorious one or the almutin. Now, I've said before that I myself worked with almutins for a while and dropped them. However, I didn't go deeply into this other thing, though, that's called compound almutins. And that's what we've been working with for the last 2 weeks. So if you haven't, so I only put I think the one from 2 weeks ago up for a very short time. So as a result, all this stuff about compound almutin will be different. So just like as you can see here, 27 Sagittarius, which is my ascendant, Jupiter gets 5 points. There is no planet for exaltation. Jupiter gets another 3 points. Mars gets 2, Saturn gets 1. So just as that kind of thing is happening, we can do that for many points. We can stack all of these points up, and we can come to an almutin over all of those particular points, because everything is in one particular degree. I'm going to stop right here, and especially for the people who are coming back or who are new, ask me questions or clarify if you have anything to clarify. If I could go on, put that, whatever, either way, put it into the chat and let me know I can either go on or you have a question and stop me. I'm going to go on anyway, but if you stop me, I will definitely go back. Okay, so now that you know kind of what it is that we're about to work with, we're going to look at diseases. And so last week, okay, good, thank you. We got somebody coming in. Okay, where can we find that chart, please? Are you talking about the dignity chart? It's in the chat. If you're talking about the dignity the astrological dignity chart. It's in the chat, and I'm going to put it back in the chat now in case it's too far up and you can't reach it. Okay, so it's there now, the astrological dignity chart. No problem, it's there right now. Hope you see it. Excellent, great. Okay, so what we did last week, we were looking at, what was it? We were supposed to look at, we were looking at fertility, we were supposed to look at this, and we were looking at fertilities, and last week was when we really got into compound mutants for the first time, and we also found the lord of the genitor, the lord of the chart, the victor of the chart, and then we also looked at possibly the compound mutant for finding fertility. So the reason we're doing that is because very much, when I was reading this Benatti, it felt like he was implying that you wanted to take the mutant over all of them. Now, he generally would say whether it's one or many, so that usually kind of means, that yes, take the compound, but also look at the individual. So that will always be the rule. Always look at the individual, but yes, take the compound mutant into consideration as well. And these are the 6 places or 7 places that you were going to use to look at. So this is what he says. So first of all, I wanted to make this clear. An infirmity and disease differ. Infirmity or accident or weakness of the body that comes and goes away. So infirmity comes and goes. A disease is an infirmity or accident of the body that comes and does not go away. So I think that's an interesting kind of point, especially when we come to the parts, right? Because that's another thing that we've been doing over the past, is that we've been looking at the parts and figuring out how to find the parts and doing. So we're going to go ahead and do all of that stuff. Now, my people who are with me, Anne Louise, Layla, etc., you all are already, you already are a little bit ahead of them. I hope that you guys, this won't be so difficult. And what we're going to do is we're going to pull up my chart, especially since it's my chart stuff there going on, and we'll find it. So what we would be looking at is the ascendant and its lord. So that's the ascendant and whatever planet is ruling it. The 6th, the cusp of the 6th. This is another reason why we do not want to be using a whole sign chart. Right? So there's times when we want to use a whole sign chart, and there are times when we do not want to use a whole sign chart. Whenever we're trying to find mutants, or we're looking for parts or anything of that nature, we want to use the cusp. Oh, wait a minute. And speaking of which, Layla. Okay, so Layla, I want to come back to your question, because now that I think about it, I don't think I really fully answered it. So the ambiguity, because since I'm bringing up this thing about whole sign, what we've been finding is that whenever we've been needing to find a part or an Arabic part for something, a lot of these Arabic parts say, move this planet to the cusp of the blah, blah, blah. Or actually we have that one that was move the planet that rules the 9th sign to the cusp of the 9th house, in case they were different, in which in my case, it is true. So we want to be using a quadrant chart. We do not want to be using whole sign charts. And so in this case, then we would be wanting to look at the cusp of the 6th and the planet that rules it. The moon and the lord of the domicile. So the moon and the moon's ruler, and the planet that is in the 6th. Mercury is kind of Mercury is a natural significator for the 6th house, because he's the natural ruler of infirmities, but because he's also good and bad, and he's contagion, right? So he's the contagion. He's the connective tissue that moves the disease from person to person, that transmits the disease. That's Mercury. And so that's one of the reasons Mercury is here too, the part of infirmities, and there are 2 of them, and the planet in whose domiciles it is. So you would look at the ascendant. You could do it singly. You would look at the ascendant and its lord. You look at the 6th house and its lord. You look at the moon and its lord. You look at the planet that's in the 6th. You look at Mercury, and then you would look at the 2 different parts of infirmities. And so down here, I put all of my stuff here. So here's my ascendant. Here's Jupiter, the ruler of the ascendant. And this is how you should do it. You should list it out exactly the same way. 27 Sagittarius is my ascendant. 25 Gemini is my Jupiter, which is the ruler of the ascendant. The next one was 5 Gemini, what was that? That was the cusp of the 6th house. 22 Sagittarius is the degree of my Mercury. Then the next one after that, 2 Aquarius, that must be that must be the first of the 2 parts of infirmity. Saturn is the ruler, and then the second of the 2 is also an Aquarius, and Saturn is the ruler. Let's go to Bonatti for a second so we can look to see what the actual ruler of that is, or how to find those parts. Okay, so there's 2 of them. One of them is for inseparable accidents and inseparable vices, and one is for infirmities, both separable and inseparable. Okay, so you can see that Bonatti has made it. Well, Bonatti may not have himself have made the distinction. This distinction may be coming from way back in the Arabic period, although as you can see with the 3rd period, he actually says it's according to Alcabitius and according to Theophilus. So he doesn't say that about these 2, so he could have created them himself, but I don't think so. Okay. So remember, the first thing you want to do always is make sure that you know whether or not your chart is diurnal or nocturnal, daytime or nighttime. If it's daytime, the sun will be above the horizon. If it's nighttime, the sun will be below the horizon. Okay, so that's the first thing. All right, I've got a question. Yes, we are still rounding up. So Maria asked a very good question. Are we still rounding up in degrees? Yes, we are. And once again, if your planet is at 13 degrees and 27 minutes of Pisces, it's in the 14th degree of Pisces, right? Because the 14th degree is 1301 to 1400. All right? So just wanted to make that clear. Okay, so Saturn to Mars by day and night, Mars to Saturn for the first one. We're going to come to, are there any charts up? Yeah, there is, okay. It should be mine. Yeah, good. Okay, so what is Mars to Saturn and then Saturn to Mars? Is that what he said? Saturn to Mars and Mars to Saturn. Okay, this is a nighttime chart. Sun's underneath the horizon. Saturn to Mars, Mars to Saturn, right? Saturn to Mars, Mars to Saturn. Okay, it's nighttime, which means it's Mars to Saturn. Mars is at 7 Aquarius, Saturn is at 12 Pisces. That's forward 30 degrees plus 5 degrees. Now, stop me right now if anybody is confused about what I'm doing. Okay, so this is how you would do it. If you would find your Saturn, you would then project whatever the distance is to Mars. Now, if it's nighttime, you're going to project from Mars to Saturn. If the sun were above the horizon, I would be projecting from Saturn to Mars. Since it is nighttime, I'm going Mars to Saturn, which is forward 30 degrees and forward another 5. From 27 degrees of Sagittarius, why did I say that? Because 2631 is in the 27th degree. From 27 degrees, I go forward 30, that's 27 Capricorn. I go forward another 5, that's 2 degrees of Aquarius. Okay, so that's how I found that one. The next one is day and night from Mercury to Mars. Day and night from Mercury to Mars. Day and night. So here's Mercury, there's Mars. So we can go, now what I did is I went forward 60 to 21 Aquarius, and then went back 14. Okay, so Mercury to Mars, 30 degrees is 22 Capricorn, 60 degrees is 22 Aquarius, and back 14 degrees is 8 Aquarius. So if I do the same thing from here, I go 60 degrees forward, which is 27 degrees of Aquarius. I go back 14, that's 13 degrees of Aquarius. Okay, I'm going to stop here. Does anybody want to, now I've allowed people to share the screen, so if you want, you can put your own chart up there and you can ask me to help you with it, or you can, oh, now here's what we've been doing lately, Constanza, Diana, etc. What I've been telling people to do lately is, if you want me to look at your chart without just sharing your own screen, you need to, one, go to astro.com and print a chart, and then two, you need to upload it to imgur.com. I'm going to put both of those, and then give me the link. Okay, so those are the two URLs that you would use for that. I don't want to deal with you figuring out how to send it to you. The easiest way is just put a link into the thing. So for the people who already have that, if you want me to do that for you, go ahead. Now, I mean, I think we've been doing, what, 2 or 3 weeks of working with cards ourselves. So that means that the ladies that I've been with for the last 3 weeks, they don't really need my help with it anymore, I don't think. But if you do, feel free to put it in the chat. I'm going to come back to the sheet, our sheet. And feel free to just put the questions in when you have them. Okay, so as you see, so in order to kind of come up with this idea about the compound almutin, so to speak, we would add the amount of points, and here I'll put them up here so everybody knows. So 5, exaltation gets 4 points, triplicity gets 3. I wasn't expecting more people today, so it's just been our little crowd for the past, I don't know, what has it been, like 3 weeks or something? It's been just us. So I thought maybe, okay, maybe we're done. Maybe this is it. Oh, here we go. Okay, so if we're using quadrants, I prefer alcabitious houses. And it'll be, if you use, when you go to astro.com, it'll be towards the very bottom of the list. Okay, so what you'll see I have done, and I'm just going to use Jupiter as an example, and then you can do the rest with your own. As you see, there's the 2 Aquarius that we found for the first part of infirmities, and there's the 13 Aquarius that we saw for the second part of infirmities, both of which are ruled by Saturn. So my ascendant is 27 Sagittarius. We went through that whole list. So now we're going to see who has the most points. So Jupiter has 5, 8, 9, 14, 17, 22, 24, 25, 32. Oh, 34. I even missed one. Yeah. Okay, good. We'll stop for a second and we'll come to Constanza's.
Garth, do we have to do the Newton thing for the ascendant for the 6th house?
You know what? I mean, you don't have to do that. I thought it was it'd be kind of a fun thing to do. If you want, you don't have to do the compound on mutant now. I mean, it's an exercise you can do now if you want to. Since it's already something we've learned, I thought I would bring it in. That you might want to know what points you would use. But for right now, we're just finding the 2 different parts of illness. So I would go ahead and do that.
Okay.
All right, yeah, so go ahead and find the 2 actual parts of illness. And so once again, the part of illness is, let's see, so the first one is Saturn to Mars by day, Mars to Saturn by night. And this is a nighttime chart. Look, the sun is under the horizon. Just under. So it's Mars to Saturn. I wonder if she has any degrees here on the thing. Yeah, we do. Mars at 11 or 12 degrees, Saturn in Virgo. Oh, okay, Saturn at 1 degree Virgo. So that's what, 19 degrees forward? Where'd you go? Okay, yeah, 19 degrees forward, right? 10 degrees forward is 22. 20 degrees forward would be 2 degrees of Virgo. Back 1 degree, or 2 degrees of Virgo. Okay, so 19 or 20 degrees. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing here. Oh, that's been easy. 20 degrees of Cancer is the first part of illness. Okay, so 21 degrees of Cancer. The second part of illness we go from Mercury to Mars. Okay. Okay, here's Mercury and there's Mars. It looks like we're, what is it, 240 or 210? What is it? What is it? Yeah, 240, okay. Mercury's at 29, Mars at 11. Okay, so we're going forward 240 degrees, and we are going forward 240 degrees, and we're going back 18. Forward 240 will bring us to Pisces, and back 18 will bring us to 12 degrees of Aquarius. Okay, so those are your two. Okay, so everybody should be finding their two. And if you don't need my help, that's great. We can just go straight from that to back into the sheet. All right. So those are the things that he would look at. So one of the things I want to do is I want to look at actually Franklin Delano Roosevelt's chart. Oh, I think somebody asked a question. 1 second, let's get that. Oh, it's already up. Oh, perfect. Okay, great thing, Dan. I'll come right back to you. Okay, so I'm not going to do the full all of the 6 points, although we can go through all of the 6 points individually for him. But the reason I brought up FDR is because FDR contracted polio in his late 30s. I think when he was around 37 or something like that. He contracted it as an adult. But one of the, I remember this is a really interesting biography, reading his biography, and especially because, to be honest with you, especially you ladies who've been with me for this whole time, the FDR chart is a really good chart because he was what? He was like a king. So he'd be great to look at for kingship. He's from a really very, very wealthy family. So he would be interesting to look at from the standpoint of substance. He would be interesting to look at from the standpoint of marriage, right? Because his wife, Eleanor Roosevelt, was a very, very prominent citizen herself, and he was never faithful to her. And then at the same time, also this man experienced a life-debilitating illness, or rather transcended a life-debilitating illness. So the first most important and interesting thing for me is the fact that Virgo is rising, which makes Mercury the ascendant, makes Mercury the ruler of the ascendant, and Mercury is in the 6th house. So Mercury is in the 6th house. Now, we're going to come to this in a second when we come back to the sheet, but one of the things that it talks about is, well, how do you find how do you find what part of the body is going to be affected? And sure enough, it was affected his legs. His legs, he basically lost the use of his legs and became paralyzed. And so Aquarius rules the legs. Right? So actually, so that might be something we might want to look at in a second. Let's get an idea of the two different parts of infirmity. So, and especially it would be the second one, right? The inseparable infirmity. So let's look Mercury to Mars, 27 to 27, exactly 120 degrees. So 23 to 23s, it would be in Capricorn. Now, Capricorn, if Capricorn is ruled by Saturn, who's also the ruler of the 6th house, as you can see, it would be in Capricorn, but Saturn is in the ruler of the 6th. We also see, look at this. You've got this mutual reception between Venus and Saturn. So Saturn is in Taurus, but Venus is in Aquarius. So even though the part of illness didn't fall in Aquarius, which would be the part of the body, it falls in the sign, in the planet, it falls in the sign of the planet who rules the 6th, and it falls in the sign of the planet who is in mutual reception with another planet who is in a sign representing the legs. So that's, I think, very interesting. So that's a way in which, people love to crow about their mutual receptions, but that's a way in which this mutual reception might not be such a good thing, right? That's a way in which mutual reception might be a more different and more difficult thing. And actually, now, How many of you remember when we talked about the 9th and the 10th house, about how the 9th house actually used to be the house of kingship, right? In the medieval period, the 9th house was the house of kingship. And then it was changed as we got into the Arabic period, into the early medieval period, the Middle Ages, and the 10th house became kingship. But if we looked at the 9th house as God or kingship, we would then have a connection between illness and kingship based on this mutual reception, because Venus would be ruling the 9th and Saturn would be ruling the 6th, right? And we wouldn't be necessarily using Venus as ruler of the 2nd or Saturn as ruler of the 5th, because really the mutual reception is between the two. Okay, and so if we looked at the separable ones, which is what, Saturn to Mars or Mars to Saturn, it's daytime. No, it's nighttime. Mars to Saturn. 27 back to 27 Aries would be 60. Forward 9 would, okay, so that's what we're going to do. Back 60 is 24 Virgo. Forward 9, what's that, 33, would be 3 degrees of Leo. Where's Leo? Oh, look at that. And look who he's with. Okay, so that's fuck the asteroids. That's what I have to say. Fuck asteroids. Use parts. If you're going to use imaginary places in the sky, use the parts. They're so much better. They are so much more accurate. I mean, that's really pretty interesting, because look at that. As a result of the sun ruling the first one, that brings us to Venus, and then also, of course, which brings us to Saturn. And one of the things that I remember them writing about was saying that he was continuously sickly. And as a matter of fact, not only was he continuously sickly, but that almost any time that there was a difficulty, like if he was under major stress or there was a scandal, he was involved in this major scandal with the Navy over homosexual activity. This is in the teens, in the late teens, and he himself wasn't involved, but there were people in the Navy involved in homosexual activity, and they created this investigation, and the people investigating got involved in the activity, and it got public, and it became this huge scandal, and that was a humongous illness that he was out of commission for like 2 or 3 months, and they said that this was a pattern of his, that his immune system was not strong, and he was not really good at handling, that he would really physiologically deal with what was going on. Can you show his chart again? I'm only seeing the word doc. Oh, okay, hold on a second. Yeah. Okay, thanks, Maria. Okay, can everybody see the chart? So my point was, remember let's see, I just want to be sure. Yeah, good. Okay. Yeah, so I just want to be sure that everybody is kind of with me where I am. Remember the first one that we found, which is actually the second part, which was about the inseparable illnesses, was in Capricorn. And then that was how we realized that, oh, look, Saturn, the ruler of Capricorn, is in this mutual reception with Venus, who's in the sign of the legs. Then when we looked at the second one, we saw that it was in Leo. The sun is in Aquarius, which is the sign of the legs. He's very close to this Venus, who's in this mutual reception. And so that was where I was bringing up the fact that it was a recorded fact that he had a weak constitution, and was of a weak constitution, had a weak immune system, and that any kind of psychological stress would bring on physical disease. And so here we even have the ruler of the ascendant, the body itself, in the 6th house. Okay, now moving to Diana, and we're going to find her too. All right, so to find the first one, which is Saturn to Mars by day, more night charts. So this is a night chart. So Mars to Saturn, so that's 120, back 120 to 12, and back another 7. So back 120. Yeah, right, back. No, forward, sorry. Forward 120 and forward 7. So forward 120, 27, and forward 7 is 4 degrees of Cancer. So that is the first the first part of infirmity, 4 degrees of Cancer. And here we have moon there too. So often, one of the things we'll look at is some of the good things that they say about this is they'll say, if these things are in good condition, then often that means that you'll be quite healthy. Right, so that, for instance, having the ruler of the planet that is on, ruler of the planet that rules, having the planet that rules the part on the part is usually a very good sign. So this might go towards good health, but we can also see that, the ruler of the sixth is in the sixth. Once again, that gives us more of the sense of there's something good about the sixth. Now remember, the sixth house is also servants and domesticated animals. And so one of the things they talked about was that people that had good stuff going on with the ruler of the sixth often were good with animals. Now, usually they'd want like a trine or whatever, so I wouldn't necessarily say that's the case with this, right? Because Saturn's opposing the sun. So I would say maybe not necessarily. I'd also say, since we've got Saturn opposing the sun, that there could be a possibility of heart issues, right? Because the sun is the heart going down. But actually, going down the line, but of course, the first one pointed to the stomach, the chest or the stomach, which is Cancer. Okay, so we're going to find the second one, which is Mercury to Mars, 19 to 12 and minus 7. So 30 minus 7, 27. So 20 degrees of Pisces, and that brings us to Jupiter. Okay, so that brings us to this Jupiter-Mars opposition. So if we were to look in this particular way, we would say, okay, that could be a possibility of issues with the head, issues with the lower back. This is the ruler of the ascendant here. So whatever touches the ruler of the ascendant, we're always interested in who's touching the ruler of the ascendant, because that means that that's something that's going to they're going to have to deal with. Now, with this very strong sun here, there could be a possibility of heart issues down the line, down the line, or just, but look at how strong it is. So that could go in one of two ways. That could say there's a very good stimulus also with the benefic. So that could say, oh, there's nothing to worry about necessarily, because it's strong. But it could also say, if the Saturn weren't so strong, I would be worried. Because if, let's say it were Jupiter here, let's say it were a Pisces rising chart and Jupiter were in Aquarius and it were opposing the sun, I would be more worried. Right? Then I would think, okay, it looks like there might be, because then that would be the ruler of the ascendant, not necessarily in a good, strong position, opposing the sun. But either way, this opposing the sun thing, Saturn opposing sun thing, will need to be looked at. And especially, obviously, you're probably feeling it most as Venus opposing the sun, Diana. But in the context of your health, it's this Saturn or sun opposition that we would be looking at. So it's this. So the two parts are here in Cancer, and the other one was here in Pisces. Okay, so let's see. May I share my screen to confirm if I calculated right? Yes, of course. I'll stop my sharing. You can go ahead and do so. You there? You with us? Oh, there we go. Okay. Okay, great. Let's see here. So it's daytime. Oh, we have a day chart. Yay. Okay, so it's Saturn to Mars first. So feel free to come on. Anybody but Layla, because I know Layla will know the answer. Anybody but Layla, can you tell me why they chose Mars and Saturn for these for the parts? Can anybody tell me? Because I know Layla will probably know. So one of the things when we actually did the thing about the parts was they make a very important point about the parts are made based on two different things that signify the two different planets or points that signify the same thing. So for instance, the part of substance is the ruler of the second and the second house cusp. The part of marriage, one of the part of marriages for women is Venus to the sun, right? Venus is women, the sun is men. Or Venus to Saturn. Venus is women, the sun is Saturn. right? Another one is Moon to Mars. Moon is women, Mars is men, right? So you're going to see this consistently with the parts, is that almost always, and actually, and if you read the Benati, and I actually have a link to the Benati, remind me to put it into the chat. If you look at the Benati about the Arabic parts, which you should be, you will learn so much about what the planets actually rule and signify. Because he'll say, because such and such represents this, and because such and such represents this, they chose those two. And he does it with almost every single part. You'll learn so much. So the reason he did Mars and Saturn is because Mars and Saturn are the malefic planets that bring suffering. And the sixth house is the bad fortune. And the bad fortune, the sixth house is it's the joy of Mars. And the opposite house to that is the bad spirit, which is also hospitals, which is the 12th house, which is the joy of Saturn. So you've got Mars and Saturn. So you've got the sixth house that takes you to the 12th house. Right, of course, there weren't really necessarily hospitals all that way back when, but you could see that putting Mars and Saturn together would make a lot of sense for illness. What would it also make a lot of sense for? Death. Right? Mars and Saturn would make a lot of sense for death. So when we come to death, we'll see if Mars and Saturn are involved in creating the part of death. Okay, so it's Saturn to Mars, right? First. So Saturn, so it's backwards. So back 30 minus another, is that 8 or 6? Saturn's at 6. And Mars is at 6. And Mars is at 25. So it's back 11. Is that 11?
26.
Right?
Yeah.
And
sorry, let me
9,
just
and then another 9. Okay, so wait, whoa.
Sorry. Wait, oh God.
Oh, is that you? Hi.
Yeah, that's me. Wait.
All right.
Okay.
So back 30 to 6, and then back 11. Okay, so back 30 and then back another 11. So back 30 is 5 Pisces. Back another 10 is 25. 24 Pisces. 24 Aquarius, rather. 24 Aquarius.
Oh, that's I calculated. Yes. And for the sickness?
Next one is Mercury to Mars, and that's forward 5. That should be 10 Aries.
Oh, yeah. I got 9, but yeah, okay. 10
Okay,
Aries.
yeah, but 9 or 10 Aries, yeah. 9 or 10 Aries.
Yeah.
So, okay, so Aquarius, so it's Saturn or Mars. So it's either Saturn or Mars is going to be an indicator of the issues. So Mars indicates the knees, Saturn the legs, right? So that would be a kind of, now the 6th house represents the digestion.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, Mars is the ruler of the ascendant. He's only 5 degrees away from the ruler of the 6th. So digestion would be more likely an issue. The viscera, what's going on with the guts and the viscera and my digestion, that might be an inseparable, well, that would be a separable or an inseparable, right? That's the second one we did. So that would be probably stuff that's going on for a long time. So that's where I would go with that. What I want you to do next, does anybody else need to put theirs up? I don't think anybody else does, actually. All right. What I want you to do next is I want you to go back to the Christian astrology, and I'll put the links for those back in again. Okay, so here's the link for volume 2. Could you, damn it. Could you look at mine? Oh, we did look at yours, Constanza. You have a night chart, if I'm not mistaken. Yours was the first chart we looked at, Constanza. Constanza, do you know that? Do you know In Führung aus dem Serail by Mozart? The lead female character is Constanza. Yes, this is the nighttime chart. Constanza. Mozart's wife was Constanza, yes, and her sister was Aloysia. Constanza Weber, Constanza and Aloysia Weber. He was actually in love with Aloysia first, and she kind of played with him and fooled around. You know, she just kind of toyed with him, and he ended up with Constanza. Yeah, I was trained as an opera singer, so I'm kind of classical music and opera freak. So, which is why I use opera singers all the time for my charts, for my other charts. Okay, I've now put both of those. I have now put both of those in there. Yeah, as a matter of fact, so he named that character. He just married Constanza when he wrote Die Entführung aus dem Sachel, and so he named the character after her. And so the very first aria that the tenor sings, the first words he goes are Constanza, Constanza, immer zu sehen. Yeah, so nicht wieder zu sehen is what he said. Those are the first words he says. All right, so what I want you to do when we come to I thought what we would do, okay, so you're going to open volume 1, which I think is the second one I gave you, and you're going to look for page 59, 58 or 59. And I will share the screen to get that, so you'll see it. And I'm just going to quickly kind of go through. So this is one of the reasons why so many of these are so excellent, because they just go through so much different detail about what a person is like, etc. And also, but not just that, as you can see, this has what a person is going to look like if Saturn is Oriental, which means that he's east of the sun, and what he's going to look like if Saturn is Occidental, which means he's west of the sun. And then what type of people. I love how Jesuits are listed. Oh, that's hilarious. And then profession, right? So then the profession, and then we come to sicknesses. And so that's what I wanted to get to. So these are the sicknesses.
Is when it rises before the sun, right?
What's that? Yes, exactly. So Oriental is if it rises before the sun. Occidental is if it rises after the sun. So it should be in a lower degree if it's Oriental, or even in the sign before. And it should be in a higher degree or in the sign after, or in a sign after. And we'll look at that in a second in charts, just to give you an idea. Actually, let's do it right now, just to be absolutely sure. We can come right back to it. Franklin D. Okay, here's the sun. Right now, the only planet that is Oriental is Venus. And all of the other planets are Occidental. Everything else is Occidental because the sun has already set, right? So a planet that's Oriental is going to rise before the sun and it's going to set before the sun. Venus has done both, and the sun and everything else is setting after him. Okay, so that's the example. We are looking at Christian. Okay, here are the diseases of Saturn. So Saturn is the ears, the teeth, the skin, the bones. So this is where we get to it. Impediments of the right ears, hearing, teeth. Some of these, of course, court knobs. But one of the things to remember is that Saturn is cold and dry. So anything proceeding of cold, dry, and melancholy distempers. Melancholy is what? Depression. So melancholy. Yeah, so Saturn is also melancholy. So if you find Saturn in the first, one of the things you probably see, if you probably have noticed, if you are on Reddit for the astrology subreddits, almost everybody that writes in complaining has Saturn in the first house. Almost now a lot of people write in complaining, but it's always, you can always tell the Saturn in the first, it's always, I feel so cut off. I'm so depressed all the time. I hate life. I'm so isolated. And I mean, that's your Saturn in the first. So be looking for that. Be looking for Saturn in the first. And because also remember that the first house is the head. Right? So that means that Saturn is on the head. That depressive, melancholy aspect of Saturn is now on your head. Same thing if you have Mars there, or different, same thing but different, right? Mars is the hot and dry, and the rash and the violent. So that would make the person more towards violence. So we're talking about the first house here, but we're really talking about health. We're talking about the first house in response, in correlation to the head. and the health of the head and the health of the mind. And we're going to come to infirmities of the soul in just a few minutes, because that's what I wanted to kind of look at. We were, they also wanted to look at the differences in the 7th house, and there were fewer than I expected. What did someone say? Is this using quadrant? What if the signs are in a different house with the whole sign? Is what using quadrant, huh? I don't understand the question. Yeah, no, I still don't. Hey, Diana, go ahead and come off of mute. I don't understand what you're asking me. Is what using quadrant? You were talking about it. Oh yes, it is using quadrant. Yes, thank you. Yes, thank you. Yes, she was talking about the first house. Now, of course, here's the thing. Okay, actually, let's talk about that for just a second. And this is going to be a little bit, we're kind of digressing, but it's important. First of all, if you've been with me for a while, you may recall going further back, and I know Layla's going to, going further back, that we talked about the strongest point in a house is the cusp. This is actually how it happened. It actually happened when it went from the Hellenistic period, when it was a whole sign related astrology, to when it got to the Middle East and to Persia, where I think it's Al-Biruni or Ibn Ezra, one of those two. No, it's Al-Biruni, where Al-Biruni realized that planets were stronger when they were closer to the cusp, and that the cusp, that 5 degrees before the cusp and 15 degrees after the cusp were the strongest parts. And so that's how they decided to start breaking things up into cusp. I mean, Porphyry had already done it by breaking it up into quadrants, but it's in the Middle Eastern period, it's in this kind of Middle Age period that we're looking at mostly, that this became kind of standard. And it has to do with what's the strength of the cusp, how strong the cusp is. Meaning, for instance, I have a perfect example. 27 degrees of Sagittarius rising, but my sun at 10 degrees of Capricorn. Excuse me. Totally in the first house and within 15 degrees of the cusp, but not in the same sign. So yes, I'm talking about quadrants. Okay. So here's the thing. As I've said before, so Dinah said she's been studying Hellenistic for a while. She's been kind of stuck in the quadrants. Here's what I always say: when you work with me, Mercury is the ruler of our astrology. Mercury rules mixtures. He rules the admixture. And so I'm always going to say, do both, do more than one, come up with, combine. And so that's what I'm going to say here. Combine them. I always start with primarily for me, it's the chart. Primarily for me, it's the quadrant chart, but I always go back and forth and always use it. And as a matter of fact, if a planet moves in the whole sign, if a planet, let's say, so for instance, my sun. My ascendant is Sagittarius, my sun's in Capricorn. As a whole sign chart, my sun would move into the second house. I then combine those two significations. It will have a first house, second house signification. It won't have just one. I think the thing is that we want the symbolism to give us more certainty than we want to be able to give them. And it's just the opposite. We have to be able to surf the uncertainty of the symbolism to find the certainty to give them. It's because that's one of the things. One of the things that I really noticed, especially with myself, and especially with Reddit now, is seeing all these charts that aren't textbook. They can't. This woman had a child, but the Jupiter's in Capricorn, everything's in Leo, everything's in Virgo. How the fuck did that happen? Or this person has never had a relationship, but the Jupiter is in Pisces in the 7th. How the fuck is that happening? So that's what we have to be able to figure out. What's going on when something isn't straightforward, and it's going to happen all the time. Okay, Jupiter when he's ill. He wastes his patrimony, suffers everyone to coze in him, hypocritically religious, tenacious and stiff in maintaining false tenets, ignorant, careless, nothing. Isn't that interesting? Nothing about, oh wait, when ill, diseases, there we go. I'm like, wait. Pleurisy, so pleurisy is the diseases of the side. All infirmities in the liver, he represents the liver, he represents the lungs. The left ear, apoplexies, inflammation of the lungs, as I said, he represents the lungs, palpitation and trembling of the heart, pains in the back, cramps, bone, all diseases lying in the veins or ribs. Okay, so he represents the veins and the ribs. Of course, the ribs house the lungs. And also Jupiter represents the blood because the blood is life. Now, Jupiter represents the blood, but Mars represents the running of blood. What do they call the breaking of blood? What is it when
Circulation?
No, it's when you cut somebody. What's that called? The shedding of blood. The shedding of blood. So Jupiter represents blood, but Mars represents bloodshed. Oh, and I'm going to tell you a funny story, or not a funny story, but I'm going to tell you an interesting story. So when I went to India for the first time, I did what I call an astrological pilgrimage, where I went to these 9 different temples. They're all Shiva temples, but they all have a specific shrine to each planet. So you go to one for the sun, one for each one has its own planetary shrine. They're called the Navagraha Temples, and so I did this pilgrimage, and one of them is this place called Vaitiswaram Coil. It's the Mars Temple, and I had a few kind of interesting situations, but this was the most interesting. So I get out of my little cab, and as I get out of my cab, and you have to take off your shoes in order to go, to go onto the temple grounds. I take off my shoes, and the minute that I step onto the steps onto the temple grounds, I stub my toe really badly and start bleeding. And the first thing I thought was, oh shit, Mars is in this. So I clean my, okay, all right, Mars is no fucking joke here, man. So I clean off my toe and everything, and I put some shit around it so it doesn't look terrible. And you have to go into the water there, so that was perfect. So I went to the water, and then I come there. When I get to the actual shrine, it's stuffed with families all around the shrine. Everybody is arguing. Everybody to a person. I get there and everyone is, everybody is just, Mars was all over that fucking place, man. It was so cool. So Mars is the shedding of blood. That's why I digressed. The gall, Mars is gall, the left ear, tertian fevers, pestilent burning fevers. So Mars is choleric, right? So cholera, fever, jaundice, flu, all things where we are parched and need to drink a lot, because Mars is what? Hot and dry. So that's why these are coming up. The plague, carbuncles, ringworm, blisters, right? So he's blisters too. He's any kind of inflammation, right? Because flame, Mars is fire. Mad sudden distempers of the head. Mars and Saturn are connected to insanity. Yellow, jaundice is bloody flux, so the flow of blood, right? Fistulas, all wounds, and Mars is your acne problem, right? Because you got those pustules that have to be squeezed and exploded. And here we go. Scars or smallpox in the face, all hurts by iron, shingles, and such other diseases as arise by too much choler, anger, or passion. All right, so that's Mars. Going forward, sickness. All right, pimples in the face. So we're talking about the sun now, right? So same thing because sun is also hot and dry. Palpitation or trembling, or any diseases of the brain or heart, right? Because the Leo rules the heart. Tympanies, infirmities, the eyes. Now Leo rules the sight. So Leo and Cancer are the right and left eye. The sun and the moon are the right and left eye of a man and the left and right eye of a woman, respectively. I'll say it again. The sun and the moon are the right and the left eye of a man and the left and the right eye of a woman, respectively. So infirmity of the eyes or eyesight. And as a matter of fact, in the Bonatti, he spends a lot of time talking about sight, using the sun and moon and talking about sight and infirmities to sight. Okay, so diseases of the mouth. Oh, the sun represents the mouth. Mercury rules the tongue, but the sun represents the mouth. Stinking breath, catarrhs, rotten fevers. But essentially, I don't know what it is or what. I know what it is. I only ever run the air conditioning when I do this. And the air conditioning is what's making me sneeze all the time. All right, whatever. Okay, here's Venus. So there's one type of disease that Venus gives you that should be very, very obvious. Venereal, right? A venereal disease. Venerdì is the Spanish, it was the Italian word for Venus, right? So venerdì, venereal, to venerate. When you venerate the cross, you kneel and you kiss it. She's venal, Venus. So venereal disease, first and foremost, principally are in the matrix. The matrix are what? Your genitals or your vagina or your genitals, members of the generation. In the reins, belly, back, navel, and those parts. The genorex are running of the reins. So that means gonorrhea. French or Spanish pox, any disease arising by inordinate lust, priapism, impotency and generation, hernias and diabetes, and of course, I guess the other side of priapism would be what? Nymphomania. Okay, Mercury. All vertigos, which makes sense because he's the brain. Mercury's also the nervous system. I just gotta blow my nose. Mercury's the nervous system. Lethargies and giddiness in the head, madness, either lightness or any disease of the brain, right? Because he's the brain and nervous system. Statistic, I don't know what that is. All scabbering and imperfections in the tongue, right? Because Mercury rules the tongue. Fond imaginations, all defects in the memory. So what we're getting into, so those of you who weren't with us when we talked about soul and the rational mind versus the irrational mind, Mercury represents the memory and the rational mind and the intellect. Dry coughs, too much abundance of spittle, all snaffling and snuffling in the head or nose. I guess I'm in a Mercury space right now. The hand, feet, gout, dumbness. When he says dumbness, he means those who can't speak. Tongue, evil, all evils in the fancy and intellectual parts. A fancy is a person's proclivity, so an intellectual. So basically, when a person is kind of an asshole. It's interesting some of the things that they consider infirmities. Apoplexies, this is the moon. Palsy. The main thing that the moon was connected with was epilepsy. They called it the falling sickness. Also any kind of stomach ache, right? Because the moon represents the stomach. So the moon is the chest. She's the belly and stomach. Diseases in the left side, stones, the bladder, members of generation. That would be because she's water. She's a water-related thing. Even though really the bladder is a Scorpio, right? The Scorpio rules the bladder. The menstruation, okay, issues with menstruation are hers, which makes perfect sense. Women's dropsies, fluxes of belly, all cold rheumatic diseases, cold stomach, the gout in the wrists and feet. Sciatica, that's interesting. Colic, worms in children and men, rheums and huts. Let's see, huts in the eyes. Let's see, vis in the left of men, right? What did I say? The left eye of men, the right eye of women. And then coughs, convulsions, fits, falling sickness, which is epilepsy. The king's evil, I forget what that used to be, what that was called, smallpox and measles. Okay, so those are the planets and what they represent. If we're not going to go through the zodiac signs and their illnesses, but you have this now. So you yourself can actually do that if you want to kind of go into a little bit more. I'm going to come back to the sheet and we're going to look at infirmities of the soul. So I found this to be so interesting. I noticed this when we've already kind of gone through most of this, Here, just this one little thing, when it will happen. So ultimately, if these things are, so for instance, if you're a compound L mutant or the main L mutant of illness is oriental to the sun, it will be in the first half of your life. If it's occidental, it'll be in the last half. And that's quite a bit like last week when we talked about fertility, and they said if Mercury was oriental, you would have children as a young person. If Mercury were occidental, you would have children as an older person. And then, of course, the angles each represent a different part of life. So the ascendant, it's the beginning of life. The 10th house is maturity. The 7th house, decline. And the 4th house, the end. Okay? So that would be kind of being able to tell what part of life. And then we've already looked at what limb we talked about some of the signs. And then, as you can see, I've just made another list. The right eye, the spleen, the bladder, and the rest. Right hand, lungs, ribs, rest, etc. They were just being kind of general. But let's look at this impediments of the soul. So unfortunately, this isn't as well kind of fleshed out as I would have liked it to be. And as you get further and further away from the 13th century, it starts changing. And it starts like, I was just looking at what Lily has to say about it. And Lily uses totally different significance. First of all, for the people who weren't with us in that original class, let's just talk about who the main significators for soul are. The main significators for soul are the moon and Mercury, as per Bonatti. Now, we did talk about Montuol Moed, the three aspects of soul and everything, and that included the ruler of the ascendant. But the main significators for the soul are Mercury and the moon, and we're going to see that it's all kind of about that. So what he says here is that there are two kind of principal ways that the soul can be infirmed. It can be too magnanimous, and it can be too timid, or it can be not magnanimous at all, and it can be the opposite of magnanimous and the opposite of timid. Right? And it says that these two can hardly or never be cured, even if perhaps sometimes some people are cured for them or of them. For the magnanimous man despises great things, the pusillanimous man esteems small, as is said elsewhere. I think this is something we might, I mean, who knows if this is right or not? I just included it just because I thought it was interesting that was kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? That was pulled out. Other infirmities are secondary. So whence you ought to look in the nativity of any native to see what kind of condition belongs to Mercury and the moon. Show how they behave towards one another, and whether they are in angles or in their succeedence, and whether they are joined with the malefics corporally or by aspect. So what is their relation? What is the relationship of the moon and Mercury? Are they in angles or succeeding houses? Are they joined to malefics, corporally or by aspect? Because if they were both joined together, or they were joined with the malefics in the ascendant and the malefics were northern from them, now what does that mean? If the malefic is northern, it's going towards the 4th house, right? Because that's the northern point. Or were to besiege them, and we'll talk about besiegement in a minute, or they were to oppose them, or they were opposite them. This will signify the soul of the native is going to have many impediments. You can say the same if the al-mubtaz over the ascendant were impeded by the said malefics by the one of the aforesaid means. Now here's an interesting thing. Actually, no, I want to go further, because I had a client recently who I did a solar return for, and she had Mars with Mercury and Saturn with the moon. And she had been raised in a criminal household, a drug addict household, where almost all of her aunts and uncles had killed themselves because of a poisonous grandmother. And so so impediments means impediment. It doesn't mean you're going to be crazy, because he actually later goes into what maybe goes into becoming crazy. But we can say that the soul, and so it was what I said to her was, when I saw what was going on with this, it was obvious that the soul has agreed to go through these things. The soul has agreed to go through this shit. The soul has agreed to experience these impediments. And so be looking, oh, and Louise has that combustion with the sun and the moon. So we talked about the suffering of that moon. And so this is a soul level issue to deal with. This is something that will be dealt with. And usually when these are going on, this woman was in her early 30s, and she said she was still in the process of healing from what she had been through, right? So that will often include ongoing healing, an ongoing experience and healing to deal with the issues. So impediment in this case doesn't necessarily mean illness, like you'll be mentally ill, but it does mean that you will experience on the soul level, you will experience difficulty. Let's get right back to that list, and then we'll go on. So if they're joined together, Mercury and the moon, or if they were joined with malefics in the ascendant, and the malefics were northern from them, or were to besiege them, or were opposite them. Okay, so that's another. So this is joined with malefics in the ascendant, but joined to the malefics in the ascendant it's going to be even worse, obviously, right? Because remember what we learned about angles advance issues, right? So if you have a Mercury, Mars in the ascendant, that's really going to get advanced far. That's really going to get pushed forward into the public realm. Going to be public. Okay, so let's look at this one. An illness which will then come over the soul will be called insanity and the like, if the nativity were nocturnal and Saturn predominates over the quality, or Mars in the day. I don't quite know exactly what that means. I'm still kind of thinking about that. I'm thinking if it means that Saturn is really, really important or strong. I'm not sure, but we'll see. And the more so if the moon and Mercury are not united together. This is important. Nor with the Lord of the Ascendant, and one of the aforesaid malefics is in an angle, and this were in Cancer or Virgo or Pisces. Okay, so he's gotten really specific about that. And not this first part so much, but these three. If Moon and Mercury are not together, so basically if they're not in any aspect, if they're not nor are they with the Lord of the Ascendant, and one of them is of the aforesaid malefics is in an angle, and this is in Cancer, Virgo, or Pisces. Okay, so that's one of them. Then he talks about being possessed by an evil spirit. And Mars, however, Saturn will make people possessed by an evil spirit more, and Mars more raging. And for these things will happen because of the superfluous moisture, blah, blah, blah. And there occasionally will be the appearance of a malefic in the angles with the aforesaid quality, and the more so if Saturn were in his own sign, or Mars in his, elevated above the moon, with her, next to her, exit from under the rays of the sun. Oh, okay, so with the moon, when the moon comes out from under the rays of the sun, and the Lord of the domicile in which the moon is in is joined to Saturn, or the Mars, and Saturn or Mars are in Sagittarius or Pisces. So once again, this issue with Sagittarius, what was it? Sagittarius, Pisces, and Virgo, wasn't it in the last one? Cancer, Virgo, or Pisces. Why? Why do we think Cancer, Virgo? I mean, I'm really rhetorically asking. I don't really 100% know. I can guess maybe why I think so. Why do we think Cancer? Well, certainly Cancer makes sense, right? Because it's so fucking unstable emotionally, usually, right? So if this were Cancer and Pisces, because it usually can't deal with reality. So, okay, so both of those kind of make sense. But Virgo, I think Virgo is extremely high strung and can't handle things being out of place sometimes. So there could be maybe an obsessive compulsive aspect to the Virgoan nature that can get out of control, and maybe that's what they're kind of saying around that. But the Cancer definitely looks like I can't control my emotions. The Virgo looks like I can't control my need to order things, and Pisces looks like I can't control. ... Right. Of course, Sagittarius, I can't control my fucking mouth, right? That's me. All right. Okay. All right. So this is Sylvia Plath. I don't know if any of you know who she is. Sylvia Plath was a famous poet
Yeah.
She was married to another poet by the name of Ted Hughes. And she was a severe depressive. She was severe depressive. She had her first nervous breakdown when she was an undergraduate at Smith, when she was 18 or 19 or something. She had a father who died and a bunch of other things. She wrote a book called The Bell Jar, which talks about a young woman. Yes, you probably know The Bell Jar. But it talks about a young woman who's coming mentally on board. And Sylvia Plath killed herself at 30. She had 2 children with Ted Hughes. It's even conjectured that she was molesting the daughter. But she wrote, and then her poems were discovered after she killed herself, and she was considered, especially like the 70s, the 80s. She killed herself in 62, but the 70s and 80s was still really huge about Sylvia Plath. I mean, it was really, really, really into her. But Sylvia Plath was crazy as a fucking whatever. So let's look and see if we can find any of that stuff. So almost none of that stuff is really here, in my opinion. Like none of the stuff that they're talking about. And one of the reasons I bring up a lot of these things is because I'm always saying these things are up for grabs, right? We don't know. We don't necessarily know if they make sense, or not, if they are right. But we want to know. We want to know if indeed there's anything that comes up. But look at her, 21 Scorpio and 21 Leo. The moon and Mercury are not aspecting each other. The moon only by a whole sign is aspecting the ascendant, but it is not aspecting the ruler of the ascendant. The Mercury is, but the ruler of the ascendant is a malefic, and the ruler of the 12th house. And look at how the 12th house, the part of fortune is there. So the wailings and lamentations of the 12th are what this person's fortune was all about, right? So it was all about the depression and all about kind of whatever the creativity that came with the depression. And then we've got the Mercury squaring the Mars. And she did get violent, if I'm not mistaken. She did get violent. And a lot of her poetry is quite brutal.
Yeah.
Right? A lot of her writing style is quite brutal, quite assaultive. Layla, it sounds like you're familiar with it. Wouldn't you say that? There's kind of an assaultive aspect to the way she writes.
Yeah, it haunts you after you read it.
Say that again.
I said it haunts you after you read it.
Yeah, because it's unsavory. There's an unsavory aspect to Sylvia Plath. And I think that, look, Mars is also part ruler of Capricorn. And so Mars is the ruler of Scorpio. Mars is part ruler of Capricorn. So this Mars, who's in the 6th, I mean, he's kind of close to the 7th, but he really is in the 6th. This very choleric Mars wanted to do violence to something. And they said what she did was heat, right? Mars is fire and heat. Yeah. They said that she put her children in their high chair, she fed them their food, she turned on the oven, and she put her head in. So I think we can see, I think that there may be a little something to what we're looking at. It's not coming out in these specific ways, mind you. It's not coming out in these specific, like, oh, yes, it's this if it's this, and it's this if it's this. And we didn't see anything in Cancer, Virgo, or Pisces, right? We didn't see anything in Cancer, Virgo, or Pisces, but we did see the aspect. There was no aspect between Mercury and the moon, and Mercury was an exact square to Mars, and was applying to the aspect of the other malefic, who would just happen to also be the ruler of the ascendant. So just something to think about as we get into this. And now that you've got the Christian astrology, he talks about this, because when he talks about infirmities, they all dealt with it. They all dealt with these. This was extremely systematic. You read any book that goes up till about the 17th century, and they all go about things in exactly the same way. And if they're going to talk about infirmities of the body, next they're going to talk about infirmities of the soul. Always. All right, let me see if there's anything else. Which tend to be cured by the care of their aforesaid qualities. Okay, this was something different. Let me see. these were different. Consider the things happen naturally, they will appear in each sex. Oh, this was about whether or not the person would really show the sex, would show the nature, their sex, their gender. So this was actually kind of interesting. It was around to what extent they would or would not conform to their own gender. And that was obviously perceived to be difficult, or to be a difficulty. So they look at the sun to see if he is not united with the moon, nor with the Lord of the Ascendant, nor is he in the Ascendant. And the Saturn were in an angle in diurnal nativities, and Mars in the nocturnal, and either of them were the almumtaz of the Ascendant, or over the domicile in which the Lord of the Ascendant is. And Mars and Venus were an aspect to the sun or moon. Look at all of these things. And Lord of the domicile in which the moon was joined to Saturn, and the aforesaid malefics were conquering, right? Then it would signify that illnesses of the non-rational soul will be those exceeding natural measures in the acts of Venus. So this was about finding sexual aberration and sexual and gender aberration. And he will employ them beyond the permission by nature. Indeed, in a female native, those things which are naturally permitted to her, or she will be accustomed to them in a male way, but she will unduly get involved with those things which nature would have prohibited her. So I didn't really come up with charts too much to kind of show these things, but I just thought that it was so interesting. I was so interested in it, and it's something I'd like to look at more, but who knows, right? So once again, we were looking to see if the sun and the moon were united, right? Because remember, the sun is the masculine principle and the moon is the feminine principle. Nor are they, so if they're not together, if they're not with the Lord, if they're not with the Lord of the Ascendant, nor are they in the Ascendant. If Saturn were in an angle, right, because Saturn can corrupt and Mars can make people act rationally. If either of them are the almumtaz, so if Saturn were the ruler of the Ascendant, or Mars, or over the domicile of the Lord of the Ascendant. If Mars or Venus were to aspect the sun and the moon. If the Lord of the domicile in which the moon is in were joined to Saturn or Mars. And is in one of the domiciles of Jupiter. Why? Because Jupiter domiciles will cross the line. They will cross the line of convention. And the aforesaid malefics were conquering in the figure of that nativity. Now, what would that mean, baby? Conquering in the figure of that nativity. Now, it could mean a few things. Actually, the first thing I thought of was, were they the Lord of the genitor, which we just learned last week, right? If they're conquering, right? But the person writing had something else. But this thing about conquering, I don't really get. And the moon and sun were in masculine signs. All of those things will lead the person to kind of lead a kind of licentious sexual nature, which of course the Middle Ages thought of as a kind of infirmity. All right. So so that's infirmity. If there are any questions about that, let me know. I'm going to go back to Christian Astrology, Volume 2, and we're going to just kind of look at, because ultimately, when it came to the seventh house, one of the things that I noticed, when it came to the seventh house and I was looking at it as far as natal was concerned, a lot of it, there wasn't very much. There was only partnerships and enemies. And when we look at the seventh house through the prism of horary, which I thought we would just kind of skim for our last amount of time, then we all of a sudden see quite a bit different. And all right. Of marriage. Right, so it turns out in this book, the sixth and the seventh houses are the longest chapters. And it's because there's so much information on different types of information. I mean, I've really skimmed the absolute surface as far as dealing with infirmities. We didn't talk about decumperatures at all, which is a totally different, but it's a form of horary. And that's why we're kind of keeping this particular series to be about natal. I'm bringing in horary just right now, just so that we can see the different meanings of the seventh house and the different ways that we would use. But as far as natal was concerned, the only things that were in the Benati were marriage, the person's sexual proclivity, partners and enemies. Okay, so that's all that was there. You know, obviously marriage and all of the things like what kind of wife, when will they get married, all that stuff. But then also what kind of, how they have sex, and then it was partners and enemies. So here's a marriage, which love most, who shall be the occasion of the hindrance of the marriage, what shall be the occasion of the hindrance, whether a man shall marry, the time of marriage, how many husbands a woman shall have. So you can see all of these things, right? Things that people are asking all the time. But you know, the thing for me about this is, especially when people get on Reddit and they ask, "Can you tell me what my husband's going to be like and how I'm going to meet him or whatever?" That's something you pay somebody to tell you. You know, that actually am personally insulted when a person asks that question on Reddit. It's like, you know what? Fuck you. Hell no. You need to ask that. You need to. And of course, very few people can do it anyway. So it's not like it's that big a deal, but it's like, you know, the gall that you think that, you know, this is not fortune telling, you know, fortune telling for 25 cents. You know, you go pay a real astrologer to answer that question for you. Whether man or woman be more noble, who shall be the master of the two, who wears the pants, whether she'll be rich or not, right? Because remember, the 8th house is the second from the 7th, which represents the spouse's money. Whether the marriage be legitimate, whether they'll agree or disagree, what shall be the cause of their strife, the marriage shall be broken, whether she be a maid or chaste. Okay, so all this stuff, will a woman be honest to her husband, she be corrupt or has a lover besides her husband. All of these stuff were answered in horary questions. We're not, has she a lover? We're not talking at all, marriage shall be perfected or not. We're not talking at all about natal at all here. Basically what I'm saying is that you could come to an astrologer once upon a time with nothing but a question, and he could answer all of these questions with that chart. Your natal chart is not necessary. One of the things I really would love to tell people who you write in and say, hey, you know what, I don't have a chart time. I'd say, look, just ask them. Just ask do a horary instead. Everything you want to know can be done with a horary, but because astrology now is so person-focused and so anthropocentric, nobody feels like it's valid if it's not using a natal chart, and they feel like they're getting something left out. Of course, I don't give a fuck, but that's the case. So look at here. Of servants fled, beasts strayed, and things lost. 7th house. The place where the thing is that is lost. How the things or goods were lost, whether it be stolen or no, and then, let's not get started there. Whether it be alive, whether the thing missing be stolen or fled. And then we get into, beasts and strays. Then we get into this whole judgment about, right, escaping the pound, all of these crazy things, right? Fugitives. We get into robbery and thieves. And so under the 7th house in horary, there was this whole, matter of fact, there's an entire book on nothing but thieves and robbery. And as a matter of fact, one of William Lilly's greatest triumphs, astrological triumphs, is he was supposed to receive some fish, and the fish never came, and they were stolen. And so he did a horary to find out where his fucking fish went, and he found them. And he was able to find them. He was able to tell what type of place they were in, what type of person had stolen them. I mean, and as a matter of fact, that's in this book. So you should read it. You should read the whole theft of the stolen fish, because that is very much a thing, whether it be stolen or no, that the goods are stolen, not stolen, if it's lost or stolen. The age of the thief. The age of the thief. It gets even further. Thief is a male or female. One or more. Clothes of the thief. Names of the thief. Name of the thief.
Whoa.
Mercury names: Edmund, Clement. Moon names: Simon, Sun, Lawrence. Interesting. Sun, Moon, Jupiter. Isn't this fascinating? Mercury names, all kinds of names, whether the thief be out of the house or not. I mean, just ruled by the Lord. All of these things were just about theory. This goes on and on. I mean, I think we're maybe just starting to get half through. Where the thief is. What is that? Towards what part the thief has gone. Which way the thief has gone. The door of the house. I mean, the door of the house that the thief is at. I mean, of the house where the thief remaineth or dwelleth. That's how specific. I'm going through all of this because that's the reason that I gave up natal astrology and went with Vedic and went with horary. I also went with Vedic, but I gave up natal astrology first of all because I was just sick of talking about people for an hour and a half or whatever, and just thought it was, I just didn't really like it. After a while, I just got burned out. And then also, horary was so interesting and so descriptive and so specific. And sure enough, look at all these questions, all these answers. What's the door of the house look like? What house are they in? What part of the world did they go to? What's their name? What is it, a male or a female? Was there one or was there many? Everything can be answered by a horary chart. The place where the thing lost or stolen is hidden, where the goods are, lost or stolen in what part of the house, right? So we've talked a little bit about this, especially when we talked about signs and where the signs represented. Remember, we did that, a sign of recovery, whether the stuff will be recovered. And so we're still just in all of this craziness around thievery, the sex and age. And then whether the goods will come back or not. Okay, now finally, we get to battles, war, and other contention. We're still in the seventh house. Why are battles and war involved with the seventh house? Because the seventh house represents your open enemy, right? And so the seventh, I'm the first house, and you are the seventh. So that's also you are my competition. So if you're going for a job, you're the first house. The 10th house is the job. The 7th house is another person going for the job. That's your competition. Right? So battles, war, and other contentions. Of course, another type of contention would be what? A lawsuit. And of course, the 7th house is the house of marriage, but it's also the house of divorces, which usually involve a lawsuit. Who shall do best in a suit of law? Of removing from place to place. Now that belongs also to the 4th house. You'll see that question in the 4th house as well. Removing from one place to another, best to remove or stay, that's called a removal. Of hunting. Why? Because of course the thing you're going after, there's you and there's the thing you're hunting. And then I think the very last thing is, there's two more. We just did hunting. Buying and selling commodities. So for instance, if you're buying a house, the 1st house is the buyer, the 7th house is the person selling it. Here we go. Buyer is signified by the Lord of the Ascendant and the moon, the seller by the Lord of the 7th. See if the moon be joined with the Lord of the 7th, the querent may buy the thing or the commodity he desires. So when it comes to buying and selling, it's the 1st and 7th house as well. So there's all this way. And of course, when you're buying and selling, what are you doing? You're face to face, you're coming into some kind of agreement, right? You come to agreement, you make a deal, right? You make a deal, you come to an agreement, and that's a one-on-one situation. Another 7th house thing is any kind of work where you work with clients, where you work with one-on-one with clients. That's a 7th house kind of job. And then, of course, a partnership. So there is marriage, which of course is a partnership, but then there are all kinds of other types of partnerships, right? There are businesses as well. And I think that's the last one. Whether a city or town will be besieged or not besieged. And that really involves the 4th house more. Commanders and armies, their abilities, fidelities, whether by them victory may be bad, yay or nay. And I think that is it when it comes. Querent have open enemies or any adversaries or many that do envy him. So what I usually would have done, especially once I stopped reading natal, I would just start applying the rules from this to a natal chart. But what I'm seeing is that maybe not necessarily, maybe yes, in some ideas that does work and some ideas that doesn't work. But I like having these kind of different rules for natal and different rules for electional, different rules for horary, etc. Anything else? And then he actually gets to the examples. So whether one will get married, I think the fish is in here. Hold on, so I'll tell you what page it's on, and then if she should marry the man desired, a fugitive servant, which way gone, a Doge missing, a theft, money lost, who stole it, fish stolen, there it is. So yeah, so this is the fish stolen one. This is the chart for the fish being stolen. And if I'm not mistaken, wasn't Pisces rising, or there was even stuff in Pisces? Wait, so it looks like Capricorn is rising, Aquarius. Yeah, there's the Sun and Mercury in Pisces. And I think in Venus, Sun and Mercury and Venus in Pisces. Yeah, so it was something like that. And yeah, exactly. So, or some of the, oh wait, I guess Venus was in Aries. But so there was stuff in Pisces as well. And it was kind of, so he talks about the whole thing, living in the country in 1637. He observed there was no peregrine planet in the angle. So all of that stuff. So if you read through, these are pages, I don't know what pages they are. It doesn't say the numbers. But if you read through, it's towards the very end of the 7th house, where he goes through his example charts. So I'm going to actually, so that's actually the end of my little presentation. And I would love to open it up for questions. And at this point, to be honest with you, you can ask about anything. I don't really, I mean, we've gotten far enough that we should be able to, kind of, if there's any kind of stuff from past things that you, especially for those of you who either have been with us and haven't been with us for a while, if you need for me to clarify anything. But anybody want to ask a question? Or Layla, you got anything?
I have something, but it might be a little irrelevant here. Something that okay, so I read this thread on Twitter, ever since Jupiter ingressed into Pisces and Astro Twitter is going crazy, right? So I read this thread on Twitter, and they were discussing about people who were Pisces rising, right? And how, this one astrologer, they asked Sagittarius rising and particularly Pisces rising, how they have been feeling ever since Pisces ingressed in, Jupiter ingressed into Pisces. And a lot of the people, they responded with that they are feeling tired, they're feeling exhausted, and they're feeling rested as well. So it stuck with me. And then this person had made another thread about how, how your appearance is like and what is your rising sign. And a lot of the people, they were talking about, oh, I am a Leo, I have big hair, and like I'm a Pisces rising and I have like sleepy eyes. So I was thinking, what does traditional astrology say about that? Is ascendant that big of a deal? I mean, does it affect your appearance, or does ingressing something into your first house, does it really affect you that much?
To be really honest with you, well, those are two questions. Okay, so let me answer the last one first. It's kind of like what I said when you asked me about transits last time. I'm not convinced about transits. To be really, all of you, now you all might not know this. Annalise and Layla definitely, and Maria have heard this. But one of the reasons you asked me, why don't they talk about, the last time you asked me, why don't they talk about transits in these traditional astrology books? They talk about this, they talk about that. And I said, because I think that they thought that they were the least accurate, the least important, and also the fact that they were constantly working with them through horary and election. Right? So they were really horary. And then basically you're working with the transit. So I think that this idea of kind of isolating a transit sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. I really don't follow it, and I just don't. I'm Sag rising.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Right. I'm Sag rising.
Yeah.
Fuck it. So I haven't felt anything different. Now, as far as the other thing, yes, the ascendant and the ruler of the ascendant are both important aspects of what you look like. So definitely a Leo rising should be a hair diva.
Oh.
Get it? Because of the Leo mane, because of the Leonin mane, right? The sleepy eyes of the Pisces. So yes, the sign and the planet who rules the sign are going to affect it. And also the sign that the planet is in. So for instance, I'm Sag rising, but I'm Jupiter in Gemini, and I look 10 or 15 years younger than I have always looked 15 years younger than I am.
Yeah.
So and I've always been slim and skinny and boyish looking. That's Mercury. That's the Gemini aspect of Jupiter. right?
Because I thought that that might be something, you know, that modern astrology came up with, and I was wondering how it sits with traditional astrology.
Not at all. No, that's traditional astrology. The first house, as a matter of fact, like if you get into this little, he'll even say, or even Bonatti and some of these, not Bonatti, but like the later ones, Scherner, they'll say that the body is the ascendant and the ruler of the ascendant is the soul.
Yeah.
So they'll even specifically say it's the ascendant is the body, and anything in the first house is affecting the body. Now we just talked about the ascendant, the planets in the first house in respect to the head, right? Because the first house also represents the head.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So
yeah.
there's all of these different ways to be kind of looking at things, right? So we look at we look at something like Saturn on the first, and almost whenever you see Saturn on the first, you know that they're going to have a fucked up look on their face. They're going to look unhappy. They're going to look sad. They're going to be, depressive. So that's affecting their head, but that's also affecting their face. That's also affecting their physical appearance.
Yeah.
Right? And same thing with Mars. Mars gonna make them. Mars maybe it might be more attitudinal, right? Because they might be more quick to get angry. They might be more aggressive and assertive. They might not be ruddy faced or whatever. If I'm a black guy, you're not gonna be able to see the red, the Mars red in my face necessarily, right?
Yeah.
So some of that other stuff. But you will be able to see. There are things you will be able to see. Taurus rising. Taurus rising, look for a thick neck, or planets in Taurus, look for the big neck. How do you feel about non-traditional planets in the first? Like, that's a great question. You know what? The further we go, further I get into traditional astrology, the less import the moderns have for me. I'm going to be really honest about it. I'm almost to the point where I don't think they have any import at all. Natally, not as far as transits are concerned, but just natally. Now, I won't say always. Like if it's right on the ascendant, if it's conjunct something, if it's exactly opposite something or something like that, like I'll take it into consideration. And I used to be a lot more kind of what's the word I would use? I used to be a lot more open to even though I've never used them as planetary, like one should never use them as rulers of signs or houses or anything like that. I never did that, but I always felt like, you know what? You ignore them at your own peril. I no longer feel that way. I no longer feel like you ignore the outers at your own peril. I feel like you can pretty much, I have, for the last, I don't know, ever since I came back to Reddit, so that's probably been since August or September. From that time until now, everything I have done has been 100% classical planets. Like I almost never, ever use the outers. And I'm always, not always, but yeah, always. I'm almost always like 98%, 90% really on. So I don't think that there is necessary. Chiron, the North Node, the outers, you can do it without them. I don't think they're necessary at all anymore. The jury's still out. That's my favorite saying. The jury is out on the outers. But the thing is, my issue is this. Can the outers or the Chiron or the North Node explain something that can't be explained by the classicals or the parts or the other things that we use? And generally, I find no. No, they can't. They don't explain. Generally, I find that no, you cannot just look at the thing happening with the outer and say that's the case, because usually you can go, wait, what about the Mars-Mercury square over there? I think actually I know you're saying thank you, so it sounds like you're ready for me to shut up about it. I'm on my soapbox, but good. So, I just forgot what I was going to say, so I could stop right there. But good. Yeah, so that's my feeling about the outers. Now here, I will say this: Uranus, you would feel them. I think you will feel like Uranus. Yeah, I think that they definitely show up. Okay, here I'm just gonna see Mercury. I'm gonna contradict myself. And I used to do this with my yoga students. I used to preface it like this. I said, I'm going to say something that you should not. Oh, just when I was a voice teacher, you should never listen to yourself On the other hand, you must listen to yourself very closely. And so, so those are the things I used to say, exactly. And I would always sit knowing the paradoxical nature. So I'm saying that, fuck it, I don't think so. But at the same time, I'm saying, yes, Uranus in the first does feel like they've been plugged into a socket. Yes, Neptune in the first does seem like there's a malleability around identity, a malleability, or even a delusional idea around Uranus conjunct Venus on the parallel, right? And then also, it's Pluto. That's the one that I really feel like might not have quite as much import as the others. And I know that that's the one everybody loves. I feel so Plutonian, but no, I think I don't really feel like I know what Pluto means or what it does, and I feel like it's kind of vague. Now Venus conjuncting Uranus, that could, that could make you. I mean, they expect Uranus is the, Saturn is the ring pass not. Uranus is the next planet after the ring, right? So it's, Uranus is always kind of pushing the boundaries, whatever. I mean, if we're using that kind of, we know what they mean. My point is that I don't think that they contribute as much to the chart as people think they do, as people want them to. I think that they're a distraction from the classical, because what you tend to find with modern astrology is that they don't know what the classical planets mean. They know what that fucking Chiron means, up and down, honey, but all they know about Mercury is communication.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the usual. They know every in, out of the North Node and the South Node and Pluto and Uranus, but they don't know a fucking thing about Mars or the Moon, except its emotions and Mars's action, right? So I think that that's part of the problem, is that so much of modern astrology really is distracted by these other things, that they've forgotten all of this stuff that we're working with, and they don't know what they're looking at. Any other questions? Oh, my little soapbox, my little pulpit sermon got us to 10 of 4. Excellent. Nothing else? Nothing? Really? Yes, it does seem like external. Yeah, I mean, especially if you've been with me, Layla, you've been here, and Louise, you've been here, Maria, you've been with me. If you've been with me, you've seen me do it. You've seen me ignore them. You've seen me show how all of this shit works with just these 7.
Yeah, and the lots.
And the lots, and the lots.
Yeah, they make a lot more sense. A lot more sense.
I agree. I don't understand. I mean, actually, one of the things I'm really interested in doing, and I don't want to be super controversial, but I want to be. I do want to be, but I don't want to be. Is I want to write into Reddit asking for North Node success stories or Yod success stories, because I literally don't think that those things actually are doing anything. The Yod, the North Node, I don't think that's doing shit. And I think instead, as a matter of fact, this reading that I had, it was a solar return reading, but it was a solar return, but she kind of wanted, it was 3 questions. It was 3 questions about the natal chart reading, and I included the solar return. And, she didn't really have 3 questions, but her real thing was, what's my purpose? What am I here to do? Blah, blah, blah. And so I said, oh, you're in soul purpose. So what did we do? We looked at the moon and Mercury and all the stuff that we did when we looked at locating the soul. And it was a totally accurate reading. It was totally satisfactory. And it was only like in the last 5 minutes, she said, now, is it because Chiron is there that this is blah, blah, blah? I'm like, what? And I said,
my God.
I know. I was like, well, all I said was, have you heard me talk about Chiron? I said, how has this reading been for you? I said, so tell me, how has this reading been for you? She said, oh, it's been great. Do you feel like it's been accurate? She's like, yeah, absolutely. I said, have I mentioned Chiron at all during this reading? She goes, no, you haven't. And I said, no, then I said, no, I don't think it does matter. Then no, I don't think it is because Chiron is there. I said, if I've gone through this entire reading and done all of this other stuff and haven't mentioned him, Why the fuck would I start?
Right. I mean, it does not make sense because it's not just one area of life where you're wounded, right? I mean, it's all about the wounded healer, but I mean, you get wounded from all areas of your life. It's not just, from the illness of parents or the creativity or stuff like that. So it does not make sense.
This is what I'll say. This is what I'll say about it. There's an interesting book by a guy named Jeffrey Cornelius. It's called The Moment of Astrology. I'm going to put it in the chat. And I learned something really interesting from that book. And I don't necessarily, it's an okay book. You're not going to learn a lot of astrology from it or whatever. It's more theoretical than anything. But one of the things I learned about it was that our psyches will adhere to any symbolism that we create, that we make important. That's what basically one of the things he would say was, he would talk about the moment, that basically horary works because every moment has its own character, has its own astrological character. And the astrological character of the moment is pushing on you to ask the question because it also contains the answer. And that's why the horary chart has all this detail. However, it doesn't matter what chart you use, was one of the things he talked about, was, the chart of the moment is the chart of the moment. And I remember when I was in South Thailand on the island, and I was doing horary, all of the charts that I did were wrong. All the first 10 charts that I did were wrong because I had used the wrong time zone. And I was 100% on with all of them. And I changed, and I was 100% with all of those. I didn't fuck up because I had the wrong chart.
Right.
I didn't fuck up because I had the wrong chart. And it's happened since then. I did not fuck up. I didn't read something wrong. I didn't fuck up or get the whole thing, lose the plot because I didn't have the correct chart. I read the chart I had and it was right on. So
bias, yeah.
Yeah, so who knows, right? So who knows? But just something to think about. All of these things are things to think about. There's so many things that are deemed important by modern astrology. At this point, I'm to the point of no longer viewing modern astrology as astrology. I view it as what I call like the stellar psychology. It uses kind of astrological format to psychologize, but it's not astrology. What we're doing is, because in order for it to be astrology, you have to give a shit about astrology. And I find that most people they don't want to learn astrology, they just want to learn themselves. Oh, I'm getting into astrology to learn about myself. I'm not getting into astrology to learn about astrology. And so that's the difference. And we're astrologists because we want to learn astrology. Hopefully you guys aren't going to stop with natal. You're going to do horary, you're going to do electional. This particular series talks about natal. But I could do 16 weeks on horary, I could do 16 weeks on electional, I could do 16 weeks on mundane. And that's the thing, being able to do everything, being able to do everything, being able to do every type of astrology. Most people can't. Most people just throw a natal chart at everything.
Yeah. I mean, if that was not enough, we now have degree theory as well.
Oh, don't get me started on that shit. Oh my God. I'm going to kill that Stoyanovich motherfucker, man. Oh my God.
Oh my, right. The first time I discovered it, I was like, okay, this is like reaching on the next level.
I mean, what really gives the tell about it is that there's only one book on it. There's only one author that's pushing it, this Nicholas Stoyanovich person, and you have to buy it from his fucking wife. I mean, it's not even, it's not. I'm not saying.
I'm not sure what references is he using either, right? Like if he's using some references, I don't think so. He is. Yeah.
Who knows?
It's an innovation. Yeah.
Here's the thing. Like I've said to the other people in the past, I got mine. This is one of the few places where I'm like this. I got mine. Fuck you. Seriously, my astrology is cool, is down. My astrology is tight. Do whatever the fuck you want. I don't care. That's why like when I was still involved with and friends with Davik and everything, and he was always wanting to correct people and everything. And I was like, you know what? Fuck it. Especially other astrologers. The last thing I want to do is correct another astrologer because I don't care what the fuck they're doing. I do not give a fuck. I do not give a fuck because my shit is together. I don't give a fuck what you're doing. And that's how we should be. I don't need to judge you. I don't need to condemn you. I don't give a fuck what you're doing because my shit is together. My shit is tight. I don't have to worry. And so will yours be. And so will yours be. You know, you all have been with me all this time, whether we continue after I stop or not or whatever. Your shit is tight now because you worked with me. That's all I mean, and you know it and I know it. Your shit is tight. And that's, and as a result, I mean, we could, you know, now we go to Reddit and we get all frustrated when we look at everybody's shit and it's like, oh, fuck, why get frustrated? They're not even doing what we're doing. That's my feeling. They're not even doing what I'm doing. I'm doing astrology. I don't know what the fuck they're doing and I don't care. Yeah. That should be how we handle it. And that means that we can be sweet and nice and happy. Any kind of astrology can work. The psyche will adhere to any symbolism. Any kind of astrology will work. I just don't have to call it astrology. You know, that's where I am. Okay. Any questions that don't take me on a soapbox? Nope. All right. I mean, come on. I can't believe there's nothing. Zero zilch, especially Diana Constance.
Just one thing, but it feels like I'm hogging everything. So
I mean, you got another one, go for it. It's 4 o'clock. Okay. I'll give you 5 more minutes.
Okay, thank you. I was thinking like we discussed all these things with the 7th house, right? But what exactly does traditional astrology say about the descendant, like that angle in the 7th house opposite the ascendant? Nothing?
Nothing.
Yeah. And like, you know, because modern astrology is all about, oh, this is what you prefer in a partner. Oh, this is how you want your partner to be. So I was like, I never read anything like that in any of the modern books, traditional books, sorry.
Well, remember, the important thing to remember about astrology is that psychology had not been invented yet. For most of the history of astrology. Psychology isn't invented until the 19th century. That's the breakdown of astrology. That's when astrology breaks down as after Freud. And especially once Jung starts putting forth his archetypal thing, that becomes a really major basis for astrology in the modern world. So it is not interested, or preoccupied with personality. With personality, it's not preoccupied with compatibility. Even though, you know, as far back as, you know, it's 2,000 years ago, and the whole thing with India and, you know, the arranged marriages and using astrology for that. I mean, that's all about that. And so it is definitely there. But that's in order to make sure that there's a fruitful marriage that will create children. It's not so that the people will be happy with each other and love each other. Right. It's so that there will be a fruitful marriage that produces children.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. And it is that way. It's not, nobody gives, I mean, now the way that arranged marriage has changed in India is that now the parents give a shit whether you like them or not, or whether you like the husband or not. Now they care. Now they want you to get to know them. Now they want you to like them. They didn't give a shit, 20, 30 years ago and before, they didn't give a shit. The astrologer says you need to marry this guy. You're going to meet him and you all are getting married in June. And that's how it went. And so I think when we think about these cultures that were more feudalist, that are older, that, they're not, so much of our kind of first world and modern world considerations are not a part of their consideration at all, specifically anything around personality. The locating the soul was the personality-oriented astrology. That's the psychological-oriented astrology. And that's where it stops. First house. We're not talking about the first house anymore. That's how they would be thinking. Why the fuck do we care about your boyfriend's personality? We're not talking about it. We're not looking at his ascendant. We're looking at your second house.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, that's not to say that they can't. If you looked at all of the Horary questions, right? Are they going to get along? Who will wear the pants in the family? Who will be in charge? You know, there was all of that stuff. It was there, right?
Yeah.
So we can do it. We can do it. It can be done. Will you upload the past week's lectures to YouTube? I'm usually busy with the lectures on and like to watch it instead. Actually, what I will do, these last ones that are all technique related, I just feel like they're just a little too in depth around the techniques, and there needs to be more kind of preliminary. They need to get into that preliminary first. So what I've decided to do since last week is only share the video with the people who've been there. And that means that I'll share this video with you. Last week's video I won't share because we really got very deep into everybody's personal stuff, and because it was all about fertility, and so I don't feel comfortable sharing that with people who weren't with us. The Lot of Fortune one, I'll reopen that and resend to you. And so I'll make sure that everybody who's here today gets at least last week, at least this week, and the week before last. So that people feel connected. Okay. All right, everybody. That is our class for today. I hope it was useful. Next week, I'm going to look at the 11th house. So we'll look at, I think what we'll do is I'll start with the 11th. I'll look at I think we'll just kind of go through the houses to finish up. 11th, maybe the 9th, maybe the 11th, maybe the 12th. We looked at the 9th a tiny bit when we looked at the soul, so we might just kind of visit it for a second, then go to the 11th, and then go to the 12th very quickly. Okay, and then the very last one, which will be the week after, will be life expectancy and death. Okay. All right, y'all. Okie dokie. Yeah. Have a great day. Thank you. Great to see you. Thank you, Diana and Constanza. Thanks so much for coming. Great to see you. Constanza and Diana, thanks for coming back. Have a good night.